I wanted to first cover 4 key differences between mixing a live stream and mixing in room. Then we'll jump into the actual workflow. First up is dynamic range. When you're at a live event and you hear maybe a walk-on track for something really pump in the room, and then they get on stage at a handheld, start talking, or a band plays, you're okay with that feeling loud because it's a visceral live experience. That must be minimized for the stream audience. We need to squish that dynamic range or do some offsets in how much we're sending to that to account for it. Similarly, if you've ever been on an airplane trying to listen to a podcast, you have to crank it loud because there's so much background noise in the airplane. But if it's not mixed very well and you have the host's dialogue dropping low when they're trying to make a point or get really loud when they get excited, that's annoying and becomes more apparent when there's more background noise. And those away from your show are going to be around much more background noise if maybe they're listening to it on a laptop, or maybe their phone or on some AirPods or whatever, and we need to make sure that is consistent. So dynamic range must be managed and usually made smaller than your in-room. Second, and tied to that is loudness. The level or signal that we're feeding to our main speakers isn't a whole lot in most cases. They're much more efficient at getting things loud for our audience. But maybe smaller speakers or even record levels or what's just kosher to have on digital recorded media is much louder. So we're going to be talking through the expectations for that, how to make sure you don't clip, then also monitor your loudness well. Number 3 is the ambience translation. How can you make sure your remote audience, those viewing your stream, feel like they're in the room? Is that appropriate? How can we manage that well? And lastly, make sure you have a handle on anything that might be split between those two audiences. Today, we're going to be covering having some music the client really wants in the room, but at the same time, we need to be able to send something else out to the stream that's royalty free. Because if you haven't cleared all those licenses, YouTube or Facebook or whoever you're streaming through, it's going to yank that down in a hurry. So you need to make sure and have an alternative royalty free playlist to send out to the world or the stream that have something else in the room. So those are 4 key differences. You're going to see me revisit those throughout this workflow demonstration, but want to make sure that's apparent first. So here in front of us now, I've built a console file for a small example show to demonstrate all these concepts and what we need to do. So the inputs first, I've got 4 lav microphones, a stereo tunes or in-room music input, a stereo royalty-free playback input, and then I have a stereo playback left-right, which I call for Video World. Sometimes Video World will label this just X or Y, so playback X, playback Y, and then have NATs or ambient microphones, and I usually place those off to the side of the stage in an XY pattern. I used to space them as an omni pair, but I just felt like when listening it was too wide, felt like you're in the middle of it, like on headphones, and having the XY, I just think sounds better in my opinion, off to the side of the stage. Again, you can get fancier with the NAT mic setups, but at minimum, a stereo pair in XY off to the side of the stage. And then we also have a band on this one. It's a small band. We got 6 channels of drums, kick, snare, tom 1, 2, overhead, left, right. We got electric bass, electric guitar. Then we have keys left, right, stereo pair, then vocals 1 and 2. So nothing crazy here. We're going to note how we might mix this for the live stream a little bit differently, but again, at the same time. We don't have dedicated broadcast and in-room engineer. We need to have this both coming from the same desk and also sounding good. Let's move to our outputs. I've got 4 mono mixes for my musicians on wedges, and what we're going to be visiting the most is the stream left and stream right mix bus here. Again, I do this a little bit differently on my own console file when I'm mixing more higher level corporate shows, but this is more of a simplified setup to get the concepts across. I can cover that in a later video to dive more in depth in what I'm doing for my stream feeds or other remotes and that kind of thing. So if you were starting from scratch, the first thing you want to do is set up a separate mix bus from your left, right. So here on the DM7, which is the console file software, is DM7 editor today, you have stereo A, and this is your dedicated mix bus that all inputs are routed to. And this is what would feed the PA if you fed it straight from there. I'd likely send it to a pair of matrices, then to the PA, but in its most simple form, this is your mix bus for the PA. Let's just pretend it's a pair of point sources on sticks, and that's your setup for today. That is it. We want something with separate control to go to the stream. So that's when I would go and set up a pair of mix buses. You may ask why mix buses instead of matrices, especially since on this console I could send input straight to matrices. I like to use matrices as later downstream containers for the stream if it's going to specific places, and I'll cover that a little bit more in depth later. We'll note this bus has every input going to it post fader because we want it to follow what we're doing for the main mix or for the house. Since those are happening concurrently, it's just a different audience in a different place. Next, we want to make sure and set up a talkback mic just in case we need to talk to whoever's on the other end of that stream while we're troubleshooting directly. So in this console, you have talkback groups. So I'd at least send one of those groups and assign it to the stream left right bus and then route an input to it just to make sure you can talk and troubleshoot as needed. Another thing I like to do is to make sure and send my stream feed out of my Q bus or my PFL cans when I'm not PFLing anything else. So in here, I can go to monitor source and go back. And now I have my stream left going to monitor A, which is going to feed my headphones even when I don't have it queued. If you don't have this feature on your console, I'll just always have your stream feed queued up and then unqueue and PFL anything else that you need to have going. Next, especially on corporate gigs with lots of dialogue or open microphones, definitely make sure and leverage your Dugan. Yes, it helps for game before feedback in the room, but it's invaluable with helping clean up stream feeds with all those extra microphones. So here on Lav 1, I click right here is the Dugan and have Lavs 1, 2, 3, 4 all sent to there. If I want to get fancy, I can actually make a separate mix bus and send it into here and maybe have my playback channels routed to it. So maybe when I do video playbacks, it ducks my other microphones, but that's more an advanced technique I can show you in later videos. Now I actually want to route all my inputs that need to go to the stream. So here I'm going to click sends on fader. I have stream left selected and have Lavs 1, 2, 3, 4 sent there at Unity. And then tunes left, right is just my in-room music. So I'm actually pulling it out and turning it off. And then have my royalty free music and then my playback sent there at neg 6. Again, this is to account for the difference in dynamic range. If I'm playing music in the room, I usually want it full. And when my dialogue comes up, I've just over the years have discovered it's usually about a 6 dB difference in the amount of level, what feels good for the room, what feels good for the stream. I'll obviously listen and fine tune this, but that's what's going on here. Then I have my NAP mics set at Unity. Then popping over to my next set of inputs, I have everything that's band related, except for keys right, I missed that one, set at -10. So that is a 10 dB delta for what feels nice and good in the room versus the stream to get it even. Again, we can verify this with loudness metering, which we'll cover a little bit later. But even then, I'm okay with my band running a little bit hotter than my dialogue because it still feels pretty similar in level. But that's how I account for it, those differences in dynamic range in the room versus the stream. You would also make sure and absolutely unassigned your NATs or ambient microphones from your stereo bus. So right here, stereo A is unselected because nobody likes sending their ambient microphones back into the PA. And then I'll just park those at Unity and then I could ride them as needed for applause or anything else or adjust levels. A note on gain structure here is it's tempting to park an input, let's say your lav here at Unity, and simply turn your gain up until it sounds loud enough in the room and away you go. And this is wrong on 2 of counts. We need to be able to get gain structure up to where we're, hitting around -18 on this desk is the nominal point it likes to sit at. And it also means if the PA usually has a lot of gas, and so we need to eat that gain somewhere, and I prefer to do it the matrices. So I would go here to my outputs, select my stereo bus, and it would be sent to a pair of matrices. Let's just call it matrices 1 and 2. I could call these PA left and then PA right. And then I would have them linked. And if they were sent to my speakers on sticks, I would then shade it down after I set appropriate gain structure, put my dominant microphone or my primary dialogue-based microphone, assuming this is a corporate gig, or this is for a church, might be your pastor's mic, there at Unity in the room, on the fader send, and then bring down my PA matrix send to the speakers so it feels right for the room. And this will also help you get a healthy level when sending out to the records or any monitor mixes of that type. Now that we have gain structure set on our inputs and it's routed to our stream bus, we now need to make sure and manage the dynamic range and the loudness. So let's go over to that mix bus, and I've got some inserts here. So on the DM7, you have one insert point, but 4 slots. And these are the 3 main processors I like: a multiband compressor, a broadband, low ratio gentle compressor, and then a limiter. Unfortunately, the DM7 or any Yamaha console does not have a true peak limiter built in, so we're gonna have to actually use an insert. On this console, you can use the USB card to do that, and I'll show you a great free limiter that you can get and use as that if you're using this desk. But maybe you're on an X32 or something, the precision limiter is built in, and that does have true peak limiting, and you can apply this same technique, but to something that's built in. So first off, I like having a multi-band compressor to kind of divide and conquer some of the frequency range to help even things out. And I would just simply, once I establish gain structure on the input and going to the PA, I would simply bring down my threshold to where I'm getting just a little bit of gain reduction. The crossover, I usually like running here about 180 or so, and then 1K, maybe bring this down to about 6K and up. And this just divides the frequency spectrum where each of these compressors are sharing the load and helping get some tonal balance. Next is moving on to this bus compressor. Again, I'm not using these to get things loud. I'm using them to manage dynamic range. So I would keep the recovery at a automatic 1, no gain, and I bring down the ratio to 1.5 to 1, just something really gentle. And again, bring the threshold down to which is tickling it on gain reduction. Just if they like really leaned into the microphone or the band got super loud, it might clamp down a little bit. Then lastly, have this insert. We're going to pop over here to Reaper for me to simulate this, but I have a lav take here with someone talking, and we're going to see 2 things here. First is this loudmax plugin, and then we have the Ulean loudness meter 2. Both are phenomenal, and you can get the basic version of Ulean for free. I have the pro version, and loudmax is free, so just Google it, and I can have a link for you in the description below. It's a VST plugin, so if you just got a DM7, like the production company here in town, I work with a lot of VOD3, it comes with VST Rack Essentials, and you can run this VST in there or use the one built into that software from Yamaha. So loudmax basically has an input control and then output trim. And basically we need to boost the input to get it loud and then reduce the output ceiling so that we don't clip. And we can see gain reduction here on the side. So we're gonna link these. I'm gonna demonstrate first, and I'm also gonna click ISP, which is inner sample peak, to make sure we don't get any peaks above. And why I like this limiter, not only because it's free, it sounds good, and it's very low latency. A lot of limiters will introduce maybe 30 or 50 milliseconds of latency. And this one, I think at 96 is only a millisecond and a half, which is very low for what it's doing from a inner sample peak detention and true peak limiter. So that's what we want to do. So I have the level coming in. I've got these linked, you can't hear it, but I'm gonna bring down this, and this is the gain reduction meter. I just wanted to model and see what it looks like when it actually is hitting the limiter. I'm gonna unlink them now, and I'm gonna turn my output ceiling down to -2. That's where I like to sit on my output ceiling. That way, Video World, you could do -1, but Video World sometimes gets scared seeing peaks that high, and you only lose 1 dB of volume. And I can dive into it in another video, but there's all sorts of specs on loudness. Streaming is still a little bit of the Wild West, but what I like to shoot for a dialogue-based centric programs is -18, and this is in line with the EBU S2 metric. If you're mixing a music-based program, you can do the EBU R128 S2 right here. But basically just shoot for -18 LUFS. I have another video in LUFS specifically that you can check out, but in short, it is loudness units full scale. So when a file is in the digital domain, it can measure the loudness and predict that if 2 different files or audio sources are playing at the same LUFS, it's going to be perceived the same by the human ear. So we need to get level. So we increase the input or turn down the threshold. It's kind of a confusing name for it, but let's do that. Right now we're sitting here about -27. So we're going to need about 9 dB to get it here. And let's increase, clear this. That's about where we're setting. So we'll let it run here. And we're still a little bit under, so let's go 10 dB. And boom, we're tickling the limiter every now and then, but nothing big. This lav file is already pre-processed with some compression, which says don't be afraid to use compression a little bit heavier than you think you might need on the lavs upstream, especially if you're going to a stream feed. But anyway, so we're averaging negative 17.7, very close to negative 18, and the range here is looking nice. Again, I wish I had the console in front of me so I could share actually running a source through it and all. I apologize, I'll cover that in future videos, but that's how I would set gain structure. This would then be piped back into the desk, nice hot levels, and then we could send that whatever output we need. Next is we want to make sure and test gain structure all the way to the end user, because last I checked, most audio consoles can't do a stream, so we need to be able to feed this audio signal either digitally over Dante or a similar protocol, or out some analog outputs into a video streaming device, whether that's a switcher with something built in, or maybe a web presenter from Blackmagic. Some other type of device is going to get the signal, encode it, and send it out to whatever server or a Zoom call or whatever. So in that case, I like to then send a sine tone at 0 dB full scale all the way up and see what that looks like when it's passing out of the output on the desk into the device. Is the different sensitivities between the analog to digital conversions might change some of the voltages, or I guess it will change the voltage. The differences and where its nominal point between an audio console and maybe a prosumer level streaming device might be different. So I like to match those up. So if you need to be able to do that with your video crew, it's really nice if everything stays digital the whole way. So if the video switcher has a digital inputs, maybe it's AES out of your desk, or it's MADI or something else, you can convert Dante to MADI. That's why I end up doing a lot of situations. You can keep those levels all kosher, and it's great. So I love it when everything stays digital. So I'll send a sine tone out on both channels and test that. That can also pipe in a metronome to my desk and actually have it hit the limiter at its level, because that's a nice click, and would really test the true peak feature and make sure those aren't clipping anywhere on your desk or later on the video stream. Then I would actually have, your A2 again hop back up on stage, or somebody talk in the microphone, see how that feels on an end user device. So if you're using Zoom, maybe a Zoom webinar to webcast, actually have someone join a mock webinar, get on their computer and listen to it outside in the hallway and see how it feels on there. And then another fun pro tip is you can actually run Uline loudness meter and monitor the input coming into the computer, which is pretty cool. And you can run it and actually measure the level at the end user device. And how you do that, at least if you have an iPhone and a Mac, is view it on your phone and use a lightning cable to connect to your, or I guess USB-C now that they're doing that with the latest iPhone, to your MacBook, and go to system settings and choose it as an audio device, and then run Uline loudness meter, and you're able to meter it right there. Pretty cool. Another good question to ask at this point is if there's any downstream processing. So maybe you're in a facility that you're not familiar with, or someone is handling streaming duties and monitoring it somewhere else. Sometimes there's also, Blackmagic switchers has an audio mixer in it, and there's also a limiter. So maybe they're trying to get a hold of increasing the level and getting it to a nice loud stream mix. So have that conversation with Video World. Now that we've tested everything, got our kind of anchor element of dialogue ready, it's going to the stream, we have our nat mics there. First thing I do is, first time there's applause in the show, I pop on my cans and make sure those feel good and balanced in the nat mics. It's also good to watch those during walk-in, and I usually mute them because just people are milling about and they just want to hear royalty-free music or whatever music to the stream. So when the show starts, I bring in my nat mics, and then away we go. And then after that, it's just a matter of watching your meters, making sure you stay within those tolerances. I usually like a plus or minus 2 dB tolerance around negative 18 for a dialogue-centric shows. I like to park it there. Again, some things need to feel a little bit louder, and that's okay, but just in general, the integrated should stick around that mark right there. All right, we covered a lot of ground today. I want to leave you with a few key points. Is to make sure you have separate buses set up for your streams that's different from your left-right. Make sure you have your levels offset from your dialogue sources at Unity, your playback sources at neg6, and then any band or live music sources at neg10. This may change depending on content, but I think it's a good starting point. Make sure and run your nat mics there at Unity or ambient mics and unassign them from the PA. Manage dynamic range and your loudness with processing across that stream bus. Make sure you test it all the way through to Video World. And I think that about covers it. Again, any specific gear I'll have links to in the description, whether that's LoudMax or Ulean or anything else I mentioned. I hope this was helpful to you to get an idea of what it means to think about mixing a show and then also setting up a stream feed at the same time and how you can divide that up. There are a few more tips and tricks and more advanced setup that I'll cover in later videos, but wanted to get off to a good start with a simple, just stereo stream feed. My name is Michael Curtis. I love helping you make your show sound amazing. I will catch you next time.